The town of Willow Creek was small enough that most people knew each other's faces, but large enough for secrets to hide behind closed doors. Nestled between rolling hills and endless fields, the place had an air of quiet tradition, where families stayed for generations and stories passed down like heirlooms. It was in this town that the Morgan family lived, a family that, to outsiders, seemed stable, ordinary, perhaps even enviable. The Morgans' home stood at the corner of Cedar Lane, an old brick house with ivy crawling along the sides and a front porch where neighbors often stopped to chat. Samuel Morgan, the father, was a man of structure. A high school teacher who believed in discipline and respect, he was known around town for his firm handshake and calm authority. Yet behind his stern eyes lived a tenderness he rarely revealed except to his wife and daughter. His dream had always been simple: to provide a steady life for his family, to raise his daughter with the values he himself had been taught: honesty, hard work, and loyalty. Margaret Morgan, his wife, was the opposite in many ways. Where Samuel was firm, she was fluid. Where he saw rules, she saw possibilities. She worked part-time at the local library, a place filled with the scent of old pages and dust, which she adored. Margaret had once dreamed of being a writer, of filling shelves with her own novels. But life, as it often does, steered her elsewhere, toward motherhood, toward marriage, toward responsibilities that didn't leave much room for personal ambition. Still, she carried a quiet spark, one that sometimes flickered when she was alone, jotting half-finished poems in notebooks she kept hidden. And then there was their daughter, Claire. 16 years old, restless, curious, caught in that space between childhood and adulthood where everything feels both possible and terrifying. Claire was bright, smarter than she gave herself credit for, but she was also sensitive, the kind of girl who could read a room instantly, who noticed every shift in tone, every silent glance. She loved art and sketching, often filling her room with drawings of people, places, and feelings she couldn't always put into words. To her parents, she was both their pride and their challenge. Samuel wanted her to inherit his discipline, while Margaret encouraged her creativity. Sometimes this push and pull left Claire torn between them, uncertain of where she belonged. Life in the Morgan household seemed steady on the surface. Breakfasts were shared around the old wooden table. Evenings were filled with the sounds of Samuel grading papers, Margaret humming as she cooked, and Claire upstairs with her pencils scratching across sketchbooks. Neighbors envied the Morgans for their apparent harmony. They didn't know about the growing distance creeping between husband and wife, the quiet disagreements that lingered after guests left, the subtle ways love can erode without anyone intending it to. It began slowly, almost invisibly. Margaret felt unfulfilled, though she never admitted it aloud. She loved Samuel. She had loved him deeply once, but the years of routine, of sacrifice, of always placing others before herself, began to weigh on her. She longed for something more, something that reminded her she was more than a wife, more than a mother, more than the woman behind the checkout desk at the library. When she smiled at customers, it was polite. When she returned home, it was tired. But when she wrote in her notebooks, when she lost herself in thoughts of what might have been, she felt alive again. Samuel, on the other hand, didn't see the cracks forming. Or perhaps he chose not to. He believed that providing, working, and protecting were enough. He thought that showing up, day after day, was love in itself. He failed to notice that Margaret needed more than stability. She needed passion, affirmation, connection. To him, love was in the unspoken things: fixing the roof before it leaked, keeping the bills paid, making sure Claire had every opportunity she deserved. He didn't understand that silence, no matter how comfortable, can eventually feel like neglect. Claire, perceptive as she was, noticed the shift even before her parents admitted it to themselves. She noticed the way her mother's laughter had grown rarer, the way her father lingered longer at work. She noticed how dinners grew quieter, how her parents' conversations became transactional, about groceries, bills, schedules, rather than affectionate. Sometimes she sat in her room, sketching her parents' faces from memory, only to realize she was drawing the distance between them rather than their closeness. One autumn evening, as leaves scattered across Cedar Lane, Claire overheard her parents arguing for the first time in a long while. Their voices weren't raised, but the sharpness was unmistakable. Margaret's voice trembled with frustration. I feel invisible, Sam. I've given everything, and I don't even know who I am anymore. Samuel's reply was firm, almost defensive. You have a family, Margaret. Isn't that enough? The silence that followed was heavier than shouting, and Claire, standing at the top of the stairs, felt her heart sink. The next day, Margaret drove Claire to school in silence. Claire wanted to ask if everything was okay, but the lump in her throat kept her quiet. She looked at her mother's hands gripping the steering wheel, at the tiredness in her eyes, and she realized that maybe parents weren't invincible after all. Maybe they carried their own storms, hidden beneath steady exteriors at school. Claire confided in her best friend, Emily. I think my parents are falling apart, she whispered during lunch. Emily squeezed her hand, unsure what to say. They were 16, too young to fix such grown-up problems, but old enough to feel the weight of them. Emily offered comfort the only way she knew how. You can't control them, Claire, but you can love them. Sometimes that's the only thing that holds people together. That night, Claire lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of her parents moving about the house. She thought about Emily's words and wondered if love really was enough. She thought about her mother's hidden notebooks, the ones she had once glimpsed when Margaret left them out by accident. She thought about her father's steady hands, his unwavering routines, his unspoken sacrifices. And she wondered where she fit in the middle of it all, whether she was the glue holding them together or the silent witness to their unraveling. As winter crept closer, the Morgans' cracks deepened. Samuel buried himself in work, staying late at school. Margaret grew more distant, sometimes smiling at her phone in ways she hadn't smiled at her husband in years. Claire felt caught in the crossfire of silence, yearning for the warmth that once filled their home. She tried to draw it back, sketching happier versions of her family, but the drawings only reminded her of what was slipping away. The Morgan family was still standing, but the foundations trembled. And deep down, Claire knew a storm was coming, one that would test not only her parents' love, but also her own strength, her understanding of family, and the very values she had been raised to believe in. The city had a way of swallowing people whole. At first, it dazzled Mark with its bright lights and endless possibilities, but as years passed, he began to notice the cracks beneath the polished surface. The skyscrapers he once admired now felt like walls closing in. The endless crowds, the clamor of traffic, the flickering neon signs, all of it pulsed with energy. But it was a restless energy that never let him breathe. In those early years, Mark believed he was unstoppable. His drive, his determination, his hunger for more. He thought those were enough to secure him a place at the top. He took meetings that stretched into the night, pitched ideas with a fire that impressed even the most skeptical investors, and accepted every invitation to dinners, parties, and networking events. His calendar was packed, his phone never silent. He thrived on the rush. For a while, the gamble paid off. A startup he joined doubled its value in less than a year. A partnership he fought for landed a contract with a wealthy client. With every achievement, his confidence grew. He rented an apartment in a high-rise with a view of the entire city, bought tailored suits, and walked with the swagger of a man who believed his destiny was in his own hands. But success has a strange way of revealing who truly stands beside you. First, Mark's circle of acquaintances seemed endless. He was invited to rooftop parties where champagne flowed like water and laughter echoed against the skyline. Men clapped him on the back, telling him he was destined for greatness. Women smiled at him with admiration, or perhaps calculation. Friends called constantly, eager to share in his victories. Yet as soon as trouble appeared, the warmth faded. The first real blow came when his most trusted partner, Daniel, made a move Mark never anticipated. They had spent months building a project together, investing not only money but countless sleepless nights. When the deal was finally ready to close, Daniel cut him out entirely, rewriting contracts behind closed doors and leaving Mark with nothing. Mark confronted him, his voice shaking with rage. After everything we've built, you're throwing me aside like I don't matter? Daniel's reply was calm, almost cold. This is business, Mark. Don't take it personally. You were too slow to secure your position. That's on you. The words cut deeper than any blade. Mark had trusted him, even considered him a brother. But in the city, brotherhood had no meaning if it stood in the way of profit. That betrayal set off a chain reaction. Other partners distanced themselves, wary of associating with someone who no longer looked invincible. Invitations grew fewer. The phone that once rang day and night now sat silent for hours. The city that once seemed to open doors now slammed them shut in his face. Still, Mark refused to quit. Pride wouldn't allow it. He worked harder, pushing his body to its limits. He spent entire weekends locked in his apartment, hunched over spreadsheets and proposals, surviving on coffee and takeout. His reflection in the mirror grew thinner, his eyes hollow. Even love slipped through his fingers. For a time, he thought he had found someone. Sophia, a woman whose laughter once softened his hardest days. But she grew tired of competing with his ambition. One night, as he buried himself in work again, she stood by the door, suitcase in hand. "You don't even see me anymore," she said quietly. "You're married to this city, to your dream. But dreams don't hold you when you're tired. Dreams don't sit with you when you're sick. One day you'll realize what you've lost, but by then, I won't be here." The door closed, and Mark didn't chase her. He simply turned back to his computer, though his chest ached with a heaviness he couldn't name. Loneliness wrapped around him like a cloak. Nights became unbearable. He would stand by the window of his apartment, staring down at the glittering maze of streets. Cars sped by, carrying people home to families, to friends, to lives filled with meaning. Mark had none of that. He had victories and failures, numbers and contracts, but no one waiting for him at the end of the day. It was during one of those silent nights that the letter arrived. A real letter, not an email. The envelope was creased, the handwriting uneven. He recognized it instantly, his mother's. "Dear Mark, it has been too long since we heard your voice. We don't ask about your work or your success. We only hope you are healthy and safe. Remember, you will always have a home here. We wait for you always." The words broke something inside him. He pressed the letter to his chest and sank into a chair. He could almost smell the kitchen of his childhood, the bread his mother baked, hear the sound of his father's slow but steady footsteps. 1,000 memories flooded him. Summer evenings on the porch, the laughter of neighbors, the warmth of belonging. For a brief moment, he thought of returning. He imagined walking through the familiar door, his mother's tears of joy, his father's proud but quiet embrace. But then pride reared its head. "Not yet," he told himself. "I can't come back empty-handed. I'll return when I've proven myself. They deserve a son who succeeded, not one who failed." So he folded the letter and tucked it away, burying not only the paper but also the yearning in his heart. But his body could not be silenced as easily. The headaches grew unbearable. His hands trembled when he tried to hold a cup. His chest tightened after climbing a single flight of stairs. When he finally collapsed at his desk one evening, gasping for air, a colleague rushed him to the hospital. The doctor's words were blunt. "You are pushing yourself toward collapse. Your heart is under immense strain. If you don't slow down, you risk permanent damage." Mark laughed bitterly. "Slow down? If I slow down, I lose everything." The doctor met his gaze with quiet seriousness. "And if you don't, you lose your life. Then what will everything mean?" The words haunted him long after he left the hospital. He lay awake in his apartment, staring at the ceiling, unable to ignore the emptiness pressing down on him. The city outside buzzed with life, but inside, he was a hollow shell, fighting a battle he was no longer sure he wanted to win. Every letter from his parents remained unopened now, stacked neatly in a drawer. He couldn't bear to read them, because each word was a reminder of what he had left behind, and what he was too proud to reclaim. The finish line he had been chasing all his life seemed further away than ever, and for the first time, Mark wondered if he had been running in the wrong direction all along. Mark's downfall did not happen in a single dramatic moment. It came slowly, like water seeping through cracks in stone, wearing him down little by little. Each day blended into the next, the glow of his computer screen replacing the light of the sun, the hum of his phone replacing the sound of human voices. He became a man surrounded by machines and papers, not people. There were moments when he still tried to convince himself he was winning. He would look at the balance sheets, the property he had acquired, the deals he had signed, and whisper, "See, you're not failing. You're proving yourself." But the numbers, no matter how high they climbed, never filled the hollow space inside. His body betrayed him before his mind was willing to surrender. The headaches worsened. The fatigue became unbearable. Some mornings he could not even rise from bed without feeling the world spin. The once sharp mind that had charmed investors now stumbled over simple calculations. His reflection in the mirror was that of a stranger, hollow eyes, sunken cheeks, a body that looked older than his years. Then came the collapse that IT was late at night, as usual. He was typing furiously at his desk, trying to salvage another failing deal, when his chest constricted like a vice. He gasped, clutching his heart, and collapsed to the floor. The glow of the city through the window blurred as darkness closed in. When he awoke, he was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped steadily around him, a sharp scent of antiseptic filling the air. A doctor stood at his side, expression grave. "You were very close this time," the doctor said. "Your body is warning you in the strongest terms possible. If you continue like this, you may not get another chance." Mark closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt the true weight of mortality. All the nights of ambition, all the years of sacrifice, what had they brought him? An empty apartment, a broken body, a heart full of regrets. The silence of the hospital room gnawed at him. There were no visitors, no friends, no family rushing to his side. Not a single person knew he had collapsed. The city, which he had given his soul to, had not even noticed his fall. That IT was in that silence that he remembered the letters they as soon as he was discharged. Weak and trembling, he returned to his apartment and opened the drawer where they were stacked. One by one, he unfolded them, reading the words his parents had written over the years. Each letter was filled with warmth, concern, and love. None mentioned money, success, or status. Every line reminded him of what truly mattered. Tears blurred his vision as he whispered aloud, "What have I done? I left them for this. For nothing." The next morning, for the first time in over a decade, he booked a ticket home. The journey back felt unreal. The train rolled past fields, rivers, and towns that reminded him of a world he had almost forgotten. The closer he came, the more his chest ached, not from sickness, but from longing. When he finally stepped off the train in his hometown, he felt small again. The station looked exactly as it had when he left, though the paint was chipped and the benches older. He carried no suitcase of riches, no trophies of victory, only himself, weary and broken. The walk to his parents' home was slow. Every step stirred memories. The schoolyard where he once played, the bakery where he and his friends spent afternoons, the old oak tree where he had carved his name as a boy. His heart pounded not from illness this time, but from fear. Would they welcome him back? Or would they see him as a failure who had abandoned them? Finally, he reached the familiar gate. It creaked as he pushed it open. The house looked smaller than he remembered, but the garden was neatly kept, flowers blooming despite the season's chill. His hands trembled as he knocked on the door. It opened slowly. His mother stood there, hair grayer, face lined with years, but eyes still full of the same warmth. For a moment, she simply stared. Then tears filled her eyes. "Mark," she whispered, voice breaking. "You're home." Before he could speak, she pulled him into her arms. He clung to her, sobbing like a child. His father appeared in the doorway, slower, friendlier than Mark remembered, but his presence as steady as ever. He placed a hand on Mark's shoulder. "Welcome back, son," he said softly. No anger, no reproach, only love. That night, for the first time in years, Mark sat at a table filled with warmth, not with contracts or laptops, but with food cooked by his mother's hands, laughter, and silence that felt safe. That he confessed everything. The pride, the ambition, the betrayals, the loneliness, the collapse. He told them of his fear of returning, of the shame that had chained him. His parents listened without judgment. When he finished, his father spoke. "Success is not measured by the world's applause, Mark. It is measured by the love you give and the peace you carry in your heart. You chased shadows and forgot the light that was always here." Those words sank deep into Mark's soul. He realized then that the years he thought he had wasted were not the true loss. The true loss would have been never coming back at all. The following weeks were difficult. His health required rest. His mind resisted slowing down. But with his parents' care, he began to heal. He took walks in the fields, breathed in the fresh air, reconnected with neighbors who still remembered him. Slowly, the restless fire of ambition that once consumed him was replaced with a gentler flame, the desire to live. Not just to achieve that, he found ways to use his skills for his community. helping local businesses, mentoring young people who dreamed of leaving just as he once did. But this time, he taught them something different. Do not forget where you come from. Ambition without love will leave you empty. Success without family will feel like failure. Years later, Mark would look back on his journey not with pride for the deals he once made, but with gratitude for the lesson he had learned. He understood now the truth of the saying his father repeated, "What goes around comes around." He had left his family chasing glory, and the world had repaid him with emptiness. But when he returned, humbled, life gave him what he truly needed: love, belonging, and peace. His story became one he often shared with others, not as a tale of failure, but as a testament to the power of forgiveness and the unbreakable bond of family. And whenever he told it, he ended with the words, "Do not wait until it is too late to see who truly loves you." Because in the end, when the noise fades and the lights dim, it is not the city, not the success, not the money that will stand beside you. It is the ones who loved you before you ever tried to prove yourself.